Yeah, it was simultaneously really fun and interesting from a research perspective and really creepy from a working perspective.
Deepa, it's so fantastic to see you.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
We wanted to talk about like having an invisible boss and what it's like to have an invisible boss.
Yeah. What does that mean?
What I'm trying to capture when I talk about an invisible boss is the sense that you really are controlled, but not by a human being, not by, Joe whose office is at the end of the hallway, right? Instead, you have a machine, an algorithm that is once a week sending you these nudges to say, the best drivers answer their requests within 10 seconds and you're taking 12 seconds
Wow.
or like um, sends you these metrics saying, you've accepted X percentage of your rides, but the best drivers accept Y percentage, right? And
Wow.
what that's really doing is shaping your behavior, just like a boss would.
I feel like that's more harsh than what like your boss would say.
Why is that?
Just think of a performance review. Like you took 10 days to finish this project, while the best worker took 12 days. I mean, so you also interviewed a lot of gig workers. What did they say about their invisible bosses?
When you first start to speak to a lot of gig workers, the response that you'll get is actually very much in tune with what the companies themselves are saying. Like, I enjoy setting my own schedules, I enjoy having flexibility, not just in time, but in work styles. So, I had one Uber or Lyft driver who told me, when you get out of the car, I'm going to put on some samba music. I'm going to chill for a while. It's nice. I get to do things the way I want to do them. But I think that if you sort of engage a little bit more in depth, and when you have repeat conversations with workers, then you start to get the qualifications to these stories. So, you know, you'll have a lot of workers who say things like, and yeah, I have to work a lot more than I thought I would. I'm sitting in my car alone all day. Well, it's not so bad. But a lot of them also say that, they find it much more physically exhausting than they thought it would be, even though what it is often sitting behind a desk or sitting behind a wheel or something like that. I had one Uber driver who told me that the very first time he gave a ride to someone via the app, he felt like a pimp, actually, and felt like he was prostituting himself and his space, his car, for money. And that he was having to put on a show of being agreeable and somewhat subservient. And that over time, he learned both to not be terribly upset by these requirements and to find some positives or to turn the process into a game. So he recognized, if I ask passengers for recommendations about restaurants, even though I clearly know this place better than they do, then they get to feel like they're big know it alls and then they are happy, which makes it easier on me.
So, if you had the choice, would you prefer a human boss or an invisible boss?
I think I would prefer a human boss. Most things that are true of human beings are also true of the algorithms and the systems they create, but it's hard for us to see that when there's no human being. So, for example, we think that human bosses have prejudices and biases, right? And we think that algorithms, because they're not human, have no biases. But that's just not true. We've learned from the way that certain minority workers uh, perform on apps like Uber and Lyft that the rating mechanism and the way that it allows consumers to give voice to their own biases uh, ends up disadvantaging people who say are African American or Muslim, or even in some cases, just women. So, although it's you know, it's always unpleasant when you have a boss who just doesn't like you or thinks that people like you are less good at their jobs for whatever reason. Um, that's an identifiable person with an identifiable prejudice or bias that you may be able to either point out to someone else or recognize at least yourself and try to engage with and mitigate. You can't do that with an algorithm or a machine.
How about you, Sarah? Would you prefer an invisible boss or a person boss?
A person boss. It doesn't seem like the algorithm. I don't know what you think, Deepa, but you know, at least if I am making a burger at McDonald's and I drop the cheese on the floor, my human boss sees that, right? So there's room for my human error. But if I don't pick up the phone within 15 seconds to answer a driving request, it seems like the system and the algorithm is going to punish me regardless of what my error is, right?
I think that's fair. Just like it is easier for
Is
the
that your
good.
invisible boss calling?
Yes, it's my email, my very real, non-invisible boss.
What about you? Well, I mean, I have a human boss, but the YouTube algorithm is kind of like an invisible boss for me. As you noted in your own research, one of the problems is you don't really know what the algorithm is looking for.
At least the way the legal system interacts with algorithmic management right now, there are fewer ex ante controls. Sorry, let me just shut my boss up for a second. Uh, the metrics that an invisible boss like an algorithm uses to measure you. Uber famously has this 5-star rating, right? And you need to maintain a certain star rating in order to remain active on the app as a driver. What that star rating is varies from city to city, but also from time to time. So it may be that when you, Liz, decide to become an Uber driver and you sign up in January, the requirement for you in your locality is 4.75 stars out of 5, which is pretty representative, right? But then maybe 3 months later, it goes up to 4.8. And that's a non insignificant change in the standards you have to meet in order to remain active on the app. You may not even know that that change occurred. So you may think, hey, I still have a 4.75. I'm meeting my standards. And you'll find out that the standards had changed without you even knowing.
So we heard that you actually got the experience to try out some gig work. Do you have any fun stories from that, or what was your experience?
The job that I had the longest was through a pet sitting platform called Rover.
No, I've actually used that before for my dogs.
Oh, you have? Okay, yeah. So I pet sat a dog named Reagan, who was like a little Yorkie mix. She was really cute. But basically, it involved going, I think, twice a week for a couple of months, um, letting myself into the apartment, feeding Reagan, watering her, taking her for a quick walk around the building because there was a roof terrace, bringing her back. And at the time that I was doing this, the platform Rover was beta testing a particular feature, which is another aspect of having an invisible boss. But the feature that they were beta testing was um, essentially a mapping function that would trace you as you went around with the pet. And then you could send instant reports with photographs to Reagan's owner saying, Reagan just had a poop, taking a photo, hopefully of Reagan, not of the poop, right? But yeah, it was simultaneously really fun and interesting from a research perspective and really creepy from a working perspective.